Welcome to a new video and a new camera comparison. This time around we have the Xperia 1 Mark 5 against the Xperia 1 Mark 6. So let's get started. I'm walking in the new city, my new city, Wesel here, and we want to check out those two bad boys. Of course, Timmy is with me here. The Xperia 1 Mark 5 against the Xperia 1 Mark 6, and camera-wise, they share exactly the same camera setup, so nothing has changed. It's just like you see that the lenses are slightly bit bigger on the 1 Mark 6 in comparison to the 1 Mark 5, and the rest is the same. Even the front-facing cameras are the same, and I think we start off with the front-facing videos. 4K 30 frames per second recording now on the Xperia 1 Mark 6. What do you think about this here in terms of stabilization, in terms of HDR, and in terms of colors? Is it better than the 1 Mark 5? We have a different processing here, but the same sensor. So what do you think about the Xperia 1 Mark 6? Xperia 1 Mark 5 front-facing camera, 4K 30 frames per second. You can record up to 4K 60 frames per second with the 12 megapixel front-facing shooter. What do you think about stability? What do you think about HDR? What do you think about the quality here of the 1 Mark 5? And now 4K 30 frames per second on the 1 Mark 6. What do you think about the stabilization? What do you think about HDR and colors here? Like I said, it's the same sensors, it's just a little bit of a different lens and a different software setup for sure. So what do you think about this one here? How do they work? And of course I have also the possibility to switch to the ultra wide angle. You're using 4K 30 or 4K 60 frames per second. Of course 4K 120 frames per second is also possible. It's a new camera app, so I have just buttons to press, and this looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Ultra wide angle here, also the 60mm one, the same as on the 1 Mark 5. So what do you think about this one? And what I can also do is perform a little zoom test. So let's go and check out the zoom, and there we have the TV tower, and let's zoom in. We have a 2x zoom mode here as well, which is a crop of the main camera sensor, then 3.5 times zoom, and then we can go to 7.1 times zoom, further optical zoom than on the 1 Mark 5. And if you want to zoom in further, this is 10 times, and this is the maximum 21.3 times. So what do you think about the quality here on the 1 Mark 1 Mark 6 actually? 4K 30 frames per second now with the main camera sensor of the 1 Mark 5. What do you think about this one here? How stabilization, how is HDR, and what do you think about the colors here on the 1 Mark 5? I can record up to 4K 120 frames per second, but this is then used for slow motion mainly. 4K 30, 4K 60 is more what you would use normally, but I'm working with a 30 timeline, so I'm recording 4K 30 here. I can, when recording 4K 30, switch to the ultra wide angle if Timmy allows me to tap the button there to the 16mm, and now we are at 16mm ultra wide angle here on the 1 Mark 5. So what do you think about this one? And in order to check out the zoom, I will zoom in on this TV tower. So let's go to 85mm. And Timmy is pulling, so it will be Timmy stabilization test, 125mm, which is the optical range. And then I can zoom in even further, up to 375mm. What do you think about this one here? Here we have the front-facing video comparison, and this is showing a huge difference between those two in terms of brightness level. And this is quite surprising for me, because I had the impression, seeing all the other 1 Mark 6 videos, that it not tends to brighten up the face. But as you can see here, clearly the 1 Mark 6 is brightening up my face, which brightens up the whole background here, where the 1 Mark 5 keeps everything a bit darker, duller, more contrasty. And I have to say I like the look on the 1 Mark 6 a bit better, because my face is clearly more visible. It appears to be sharper, and I see a little bit more details, where here on the 1 Mark 5 it appears to be a little bit softer on my face, and the detail level is also there. But it's a bit darker there, probably a bit more realistic on the 1 Mark 5, and the 1 Mark 6 is brightening things up for some reason. Not sure what's going on there, why I did this, maybe it was a fluke, but this is what I got here in terms of front-facing video. The rest, look at the bokeh, look at the background there, it's identical. There's not much of a difference between those two. This was quite surprising for me when I was checking out the main footage of the video, because it looks like the Xperia 1 Mark 6 is using some kind of HDR in the video. As you can clearly see here when the video starts, we have like the blue in the sky and we can see the white spots there, and here everything is overexposed in the 1 Mark 5. Also the colors look completely different. It looks much more pleasant on the 1 Mark 6 with a bit more warmer kind of color and a bit more punchy kind of colors. Look at the yellow there and look at the yellow there for the post bunk. It's like already, yeah, the blue is maybe a bit overdone, a bit more over processed there, a little bit too saturated there, but it's not overly done there, I would say. Here we have a bit more harsher shadows on the 1 Mark 5. Look at the green here, look at the green there. It's a bit more punchy colors there, and it looks a ton better, I have to say. The 1 Mark 6 video looks a ton better than the 1 Mark 5 video for some reason. And I'm not sure what they're doing. Maybe they are doing HDR processing on the 1 Mark 6. I didn't turn any HDR on. I just left the default settings in the same I did for the 1 Mark 5. Just the 1 Mark 5 is using the Video Pro app, where the 1 Mark 6 is using the Photo app. So, and when we like switch to the ultra wide angle, and here both are a bit stuttery when it comes to switching. So here we have the ultra wide angle, works fine, and here we have the ultra wide angle as well, works fine. It's a bit of stuttery, maybe a bit smoother on the 1 Mark 6, but again, when I'm just moving around, you can see there's a bit of blue, there's like overexposing there. We don't have this so much here. It's a bit more shadowy here. It's like raising the shadows a little bit more, and yeah, in general, I think I like the image of the 1 Mark 6 tremendously better than the 1 Mark 5 actually, which is quite interesting there. And yeah, let's go and check out the zoom shots on both. Here you can also see clearly that the HDR is working better on the 1 Mark 6 when it comes to videos, where we have this overexposure there. Not sure if it changes. Yeah, it's changing a little bit there as well. And then when we zoom in throughout the shots, this is what the 1 Mark 5 can do. We can go a little bit further, like 10 times I think. This is here. And now compare it to the shot from the 1 Mark 6. And yeah, you can clearly see, yes, the optical zoom range is a bit further, so the 1 Mark 6 gets a bit more details there in terms of video for sure. And yeah, I'm surprised that it's working so fine here and so good between those two. Yeah, you can clearly see how much more detail we have in the 1 Mark 6. So yes, the 1 Mark 6 is definitely the winner in terms of videos against the 1 Mark 5 with the default settings. Of course, with 1 Mark 5, I know you can do HDR, you can do wide range if you want to, and then probably you can get something similar to the 1 Mark 6. But the 1 Mark 6 out of the box can beat the Xperia 1 Mark 5 in terms of videography. Here the photos. On the left always the Xperia 1 Mark 6, on the right always the Xperia 1 Mark 5. What you can see here is a dramatic difference. But why is it so? You can see also already, I didn't really notice it. There was a sun apparently out on this day. And the Xperia 1 Mark 5 caught the sun there, where the 1 Mark 6 had the bad luck that the sun was just hiding behind the clouds. So this is why we have a much more contrasty kind of look on the 1 Mark 5. But what we can clearly see is that the HDR on the 1 Mark 5 is working a little bit better there in preserving the highlights here, where the 1 Mark 6 doesn't like scare away from just overexposing the highlights like it does here. What we can also clearly see is a bit of more sharpening applied, maybe a little bit sharper lens there on the 1 Mark 6. As you can see here, the post bunk is clearly more readable here than here, where it's a bit blurry, as well as like on the edges here you can see it's a bit blurrier. And when it comes to the details here in the middle, for example, this is the Berlin Gate in Wesel. You can also see that we have a bit of like a darker exposure. In terms of sharpness, I think it's again a bit more sharpened up on the 1 Mark 6. Maybe a bit more natural sharpness as well there, and it's a bit softer on the 1 Mark 5. Color-wise, I think besides like being a bit too dark on the 1 Mark 5, being a bit too bright on the 1 Mark 6, they are very, very similar here. You can see in terms of colors, there's not a huge difference between those two with the 1X lens. Let's go to the zoom lens. As in this case, the sky didn't change so much, so the sun was not out there. and we have the 3.5 times zoom, and here we can see a slight difference. We have a bit of more contrasty look on the 1 Mark 6 and a bit more bluish hue where we have warmer colors on the 1 Mark 5. When we zoom in to check out the detail, you can see both are not very good in terms of sharpness and detail level there. Very blurry both, I would say, in comparison to other smartphones there. Lacking a bit of detail. I think we are like a bit more used to getting the pixel bin versions that have a little bit more details here. But here both only feature 12 megapixels, and yeah, what we can clearly see if you really pixel peep and compare is like, I think it's a bit blurry on the 1 Mark 5, where it's a bit sharper here on the 1 Mark 6. It might be sharpening, it might be contrast, it might be better lens design that makes it look appear a little bit sharper, but it's very close together there, and you can see not much of a difference there between those two. And yeah, the same goes if you take a look at here. You can see again it's a bit sharp on the 1 Mark 6, but it's a bit blurrier on the 1 Mark 5. And also with the text, yeah, we can see the pattern of the background a little bit clearer, I would say, on the 1 Mark 6. And it's a bit overexposed, maybe not so clear there. Maybe might be the color difference here, because this is warmed up a bit and this is a bit more cooler there. It might be also the sharpness and everything together that makes it look appear this pattern there in the background appear a bit better there. Then we can zoom in even further. This is now the interesting thing, because we have now 5.2 times zoom here on the Xperia 1 Mark 5, and we have 7.2 times zoom, I think it is, on the Xperia 1 Mark 6. So the difference is not completely huge, but you can see that the shutter speed is a bit slower here on the 1 Mark 5, where it's a bit faster on the 1 Mark 6, and it's a bit faster on the 1 Mark 5. We have f-stop number f2.8 still on the 1 Mark 5, where we have 3.5 here on the 1 Mark 6 at this zoom level. When we compare this with this, you can clearly see that there's not much to it, not much difference between those two. Even if I zoom in here to the middle, for example, where at 3.5 times we could see an advantage for the 1 Mark 6, I don't see it so much here on the 7 versus 5 times zoom. In fact, besides like the color differences that we occasionally have, like a bit more greenish kind of colors here on the 1 Mark 6, is not much of detail levels, because we have the same sensor there behind it. It's just like the optics that have improved. So I could even like digitally crop in here one step and we get something very similar, a little bit blurrier than on the 1 Mark 6, but it's very close together there between those two. Let's go further, 10 times versus 10 times, and here is where you can see the advantage of the 1 Mark 6 and against the 1 Mark 5 with its further optical zoom on the 1 Mark 6, where the 1 Mark 5 has to digitally crop into the 5.2 times zoom, and there you get a very blurry kind of picture. If you compare it here with the 1 Mark 6, it's not a huge difference. Where we have completely sharpness on the 1 Mark 6, you can see it's like it is a bit blurry, but it is winning the 1 Mark 6 against the 1 Mark 5 in terms of the 10 times zoom levels for sure. And yeah, it is a difference that you can see, and probably this is probably the most noticeable difference between those two. You can see also like the fragments here and the pixels, pixelation on the 1 Mark 5 that you don't have so much on the 1 Mark 6. And I didn't even bother zooming in further because it's no point in it. But yes, the 1 Mark 6 has a better 10 times zoom than the 1 Mark 5 for sure. Ultra wide angle, what we can clearly see here is a bit more punchy colors on the 1 Mark 6. This was surprising for me. You can see the green grass here. It's a bit more punchy there, the colors, than on the 1 Mark 5, but it's a slight difference. When we take a look at the other things here in the background, for example, again, I think the 1 Mark 5 is like handling HDR and the bright spots by pulling them down a little bit, where the 1 Mark 6 doesn't even bother to do this. It just keeps it as it is, and so we have a little bit of overexposure there in the background then. This can have like advantages and disadvantages, can look a bit more artificial when you pull down the bright highlights. But also, like, people would say, yeah, 1 Mark 6 has bad HDR, but it's just like the processing. They decided to not pull down the stuff that tends to overexpose. And this is what you can clearly see there throughout the picture. Otherwise, in terms of sharpness, it's identical. Not much of a difference there between those two. Now we come to another big difference between those two. And this is something where we again have the tele zoom also involved somehow. First of all, there's a big difference in close focusing distance. Yes, the ultra wide angle can do this as well, but I didn't test the ultra wide angle. I tested the 1x zoom. And the biggest difference between those two, and actually I think it was promised for the 1 Mark 5 at one point, is the 48mm, so 2x crop onto the main camera sensor. On the 1 Mark 5 it is still using the 12 megapixels cropping and then upscaling, which is not ideal, but at least you can get away with some close-up shots like this one here, which look okayish, I would say, for a close-up shot. But see what the Xperia 1 Mark 6 can do with its 2x crop, and this is this, because it's utilizing the full 48 megapixels and then cropping in, and then you have 12 megapixels to deal with. Much more natural looking, nicer blur, background blur there as well. It is just simply better, miles better. Also, I think get a little bit closer, get a nicer bokeh there in the background. And also in terms of like colors, I think it's a bit tuned down there, it's a bit overexposed there. The 1 Mark 6 is doing a lot better. And we can do even better, because this is the closest and best macro kind of shot or close-up shot I can get on the 1 Mark 5. So basically it doesn't have a macro mode. On the 1 Mark 6 I have a macro mode. I can use the tele macro capabilities of this phone. And this means, yeah, the telecamera can be used for macro photography. This is the usual macro photography by default. If you switch to the tele macro option, you have to have a manual slider there for the focusing, but it's working fine. It is a very shallow depth of field. This is why we have, it's not 100% sharp there. Maybe it was a bit too shaky, or the flower was too shaky because it was windy. But this is in focus. As you can see, if I go up, it's going slightly out of focus there already. But it's looking very pretty good. And I have even the possibility to zoom even further in, and this is what I get then. And this is looking very crazy. If you have a controlled environment where the flower is not moving around and you have good lighting, you can get away with amazing macro shots. Probably I have to do a macro evaluation against, or macro test against the Pura 70 Ultra, which is currently the macro king, I would say, as I stated in one of my last videos. With the Xperia 1 Mark 6, maybe in a more controlled environment where I have the possibility to keep still and have the flower still there as well. As you can see, it was moving around a bit, so if I go 100%, it doesn't look so great there. But you have this ability where the 1 Mark 5 doesn't offer anything like this at all. Let's take a look at selfies. Basically, besides like me probably holding it differently here, and the colors are a bit warmer on the 1 Mark 5, the 1 Mark 6 is a bit cooled down. It's basically identical. If I zoom in, even one could say there, argue that the 1 Mark 5 is even looking a bit sharper there, because it's a bit softer here, especially on my eyebrows and my skin as well. So yeah, maybe I nailed, because I was a bit closer, as you can see here, with the 1 Mark 5, and nailed the focus point ideally, where here I was a bit further away, and so I didn't nail the focus point 100% there on the 1 Mark 6. But besides the color difference there, and if I would hold it a bit closer, it would be like same in terms of sharpness. There's not much of a difference. It's the same kind of camera sensor, same kind of lens, nothing to brag about. Let's take a look at the portrait shots, and then we have some new thing on the 1 Mark 6. As you can see here, 1 Mark 6 has 48 millimeter mode there as well. So we have the possibility to 2x portrait or bokeh mode that we can use there. On 1 Mark 5 we only have the 3.5 times, and I still hope the 1 Mark 5 will get the 2x mode there at one point, but it didn't here. What we can clearly see is, however, we have again a warmer hue on the 1 Mark 5 and a bit of colder on the 1 Mark 6. And then what we can also see is the 1 Mark 5 is at 2x, benefiting from the larger main camera sensor, less noise, visible noise, and looks pretty smooth, I would say there. And the 1 Mark 5 with its 3.5 times is already suffering from a little bit of noise that you can see here, even though it was like still daylight there. Yeah, the sun was setting, but still. And yeah, I get more bluish hues, a bit more warmish hues here. And when we go to 3.5 versus 3.5, yeah, it was a bit, I think, closed up here with the 1 Mark 6. Again, more cooler colors on the 1 Mark 6, where we have a bit of warmer colors on the 1 Mark 5. In terms of detail levels, the same kind of noise pattern that you can see. If I just zoom in a little bit there, you can see a different, yeah, the same kind of noise pattern going on. It's the same sensor there. It's just slightly different lens there in front. But also in terms of like the bokeh and the bokeh balls and the cutout there, doing a similar performance there. Nothing that I would say one wins against the other. Then we come to 5.2 and we come to 7.2 times zoom here, because the bokeh mode doesn't 7.1 times zoom actually. The bokeh mode doesn't allow for the variable zoom to work, which is a bit of a limitation. I don't know why the 1 Mark 6 has this limitation, because we have this variable zoom there. Why I cannot like say I want 3.9 times zoom and take still a bokeh shot. Anyway, it's a limitation there. Nevertheless, again, warmish kind of colors on the 1 Mark 5, actually a bit more pleasant looking for my eyes, where it's a bit bluer here on the 1 Mark 6. Detail level there is on par, I would say. There's not much you can like talk about. It's like a little bit closer up on the 1 Mark 6 for sure, but the noise level and so on, because of the smallish kind of sensor and the lower aperture for sure on the 1 Mark 6, is not really a groundbreaking improvement. Let's take a look at normal shots with the telezoom lens without using the bokeh or portrait mode. What we can clearly see here is again a bit more warmish kind of colors on the 1 Mark 5. And what I like on the 1 Mark 5 better than on the 1 Mark 6 is the shadows. It's brightening up the shadows a little bit so I don't look too ghosty. Where here it's like keeping the shadow a little bit darker and my eye color looks wrong, where here my eye color is right. Yeah, so I like the 1 Mark 5 photo a bit better there. Everything else, I think optically is almost the same, on par there. The background blur and so on, not much difference there between those two. Maybe a bit contrasty look on the 1 Mark 6, but this is very, very, very similar, as you can see here, between those two. And then we go to, this is 5.2 on both now, because of course in normal mode I can also do 5.2 times on the 1 Mark 6. It's just like zooming in using the variable Apple zoom. And do you see much of a difference? Again, like in terms of colors, I like the 1 Mark 5 a bit better there. 1 Mark 6 is doing a little bit like too bluish again, and a bit too contrasty kind of look there. Bokeh level and so on, basically on par with each other. There's a bit the contrasty like kind of look makes it look a little bit more in focus, but it's really almost the same there. So yeah, in daylight shots, basically, like I said, almost identical. I would like rate them identical. It's like in portrait shots, we get more flexibility with the 1 Mark 6. The 1 Mark 5 has a nicer, pleasant colors there, I would say, with a bit more warmish kind of colors, but this might be a stylish kind of thing. I would give them, in terms of portrait shots, the same kind of points. Just the 1 Mark 6 has the advantage that you have 2x. And this, I think, is a game changer somehow, together with the macro capabilities or close focusing capabilities of the 1 Mark 6 in general, because of course the 2x, the 48 megapixels, is a huge benefit for the 1 Mark 6 already, not only for macro or close-up kind of shots, but also for the portrait shots, especially if you have a bit of lower light situations where you can rely on this. Where I wouldn't rely so much of the 3.5 times zoom on both, actually, because it's getting grainy and getting noisy quite quickly. So yeah, it is definitely an improvement on the 1 Mark 6, but a minor improvement, to be completely honest there with you. The rest is basically identical between those two. now using the Xperia 1 Mark 6, and this one here also 4K 30 frames per second, no dedicated night mode or anything. Walking towards the light, my face should be nicely illuminated now. Now let's cross the street, and we have the light directly over me. Now behind me, how well does the 1 Mark 6 handle this situation here? We have a different lens there, so maybe they are handling it a bit different here. And now turning towards the light, and with the moon in the background that you hopefully can see eventually. What do you think about this one here? Audio quality and of course video quality as well. 4K 30 frames per second now in night mode using the Xperia 1 Mark 5, and yeah, walking towards the light like always, and yeah, I'm standing right under the light, and now light in the background. How well is it doing this? And let me switch like this. You can see probably the moon in the background there. Light illuminating my face. What do you think about the audio quality, about the video quality here on the 1 Mark 5? Night pics, and just like the daylight pics, they are pretty much identical. So we have the same sensor, we have a different kind of glass on the 1 Mark 6, but nearly everything else looks the same here. In terms of colors, I don't notice any differences, so we have to really zoom in to see some differences. 1 Mark 5 here, we can clearly see that the 1 Mark 5 is struggling a little bit with its night mode, where it's a bit of blurry there. It might be my mistake that I wasn't holding it correctly, steadily as it should be, but in my experience, I did the same thing as always, so it's a bit blurrier here. So it might be that the OIS was working a bit better on the 1 Mark 6, or I was working a little bit better there with stabilizing it. But you can see it's a bit more blurry. Otherwise, like the colors and everything else there in terms of detail levels is basically identical with the main camera sensor. Let's go to the zoom shot, and this is quite interesting because we have the 5.2 times versus 3.5 times versus 3.5 times zoom here between those two. And you can see that they are basically identical what they are doing, but we have a slight difference there. I think it's a bit brighter on the Xperia 1 Mark 5 in comparison to the 1 Mark 6. And when I zoom in, you can see it's not really helping any one of those. It's a bit darker on the 1 Mark 6. It's a bit brighter on the 1 Mark 5, but it's very noisy on both. And both are basically unusable in this kind of nighttime situations. You have to have a little bit more light, like this one here that I shot with the ultra wide angle. First of all, we don't see much of a difference in terms of colors here, I would say, but we can see a little bit a difference in terms of how they handle those bright light sources and brightness in general, and also the lens and the coating. I was doing this at the exact kind of spot there, and you can see like the lens flare effect here. It looks like this, and here we have like this white stripe. So maybe the change of the lens helped here a little bit. Also, what you can clearly see is like we have a little bit toned down highlights here again on the 1 Mark 5, where here it keeps it a little bit like brighter there. For sure. So it might be a car passing by, is it? Yeah, maybe a car is passing by that makes it a bit brighter there. But the rest here looks pretty much identical there. It's very noisy. The highlights here are handled the same, I would say. The moon, by the way. And I also try to shoot the moon here with, what is it? I think 7.1 versus 5.2, and nearly identical. What they get in terms of results is unusable. And then another shot here where we can clearly see this is again 7.1 versus 5.2, where the Xperia 1 Mark 6 is working a bit better. It handles the highlights here a bit better, controls them a bit better, where here it's completely unusable on the 1 Mark 5, I would say. Here at least you can read what the shop is called and even the name of the owner of the shop. And here you can see at least that there is something written. Here is completely white and blown out. So yeah, there is a bit of a difference, and I think at nighttime the processing is handling this a bit better on the 1 Mark 6 than on the 1 Mark 5, but it's so close together that yeah, there's not much that they improved there. Here, the selfie shot, quite interesting, because I think the 1 Mark 5 did a better job there, where the 1 Mark 6 has a bit of like too brighten up my face there. And yeah, what do you think about this one here? Also a bit too greenish and yellowish on the 1 Mark 6 for some reason, where the 1 Mark 5 has it more correct, I would say. In terms of background and handling of the lights there in the background, identical. I don't see much of a difference between those two. Yeah, and this is basically everything in terms of nighttime. It's just like, besides the main camera, forget everything else on the Xperia, because it's not so good. Let's come to the conclusion and ranking. TLDR, the Xperia 1 Mark 5 gets 4.375 points, where the Xperia 1 Mark 6 gets 4.420 points. So we have a clear winner here, which is the Xperia 1 Mark 6. But as I told you before, we have the same sensors. And yeah, just the lenses are different here and the processing is different. So where do we see the big changes here? It's not the main camera photo quality, which is almost exactly the same. Sometimes you see a little bit like more overexposure. So we have a bit of more brighter highlights on the 1 Mark 6, where the 1 Mark 5 keeps it a little bit lower there. But in terms of colors, they're almost the same there. The ultra wide angle is the same, basically. I didn't notice much of a difference. Where we see a improvement for sure is the zoom camera photo quality. It's not so much the 3.5 times zoom, 5.2 or even the 7.1 times zoom actually that the Xperia 1 Mark 6 has, and the 1 Mark 5 goes to only 5.2 times zoom optically. It is more the new capabilities of macro photography that you have with the tele camera. And of course, then the long range zoom, so beyond 7 times, like 10 times zoom or something like this, where you see an advantage on the Xperia 1 Mark 6. Also, which I will calculate in, even though it is a main camera photo, but the zoom capability of the main camera, like the crop, is much better on the Xperia 1 Mark 6 as well. So this is why we have 4.3 points here. This is the huge difference. Video recording quality, it is improved for sure on the Xperia 1 Mark 6. This is processing mostly, I would say, so the 1 Mark 5 could get this as well, but it's quite interesting to see not so many overblown highlights in the background, so the HDR being a bit better there. We have a bit of more punchy colors there for sure, so this is like a matter of taste. Maybe the more natural look on the 1 Mark 5 some people find a little bit better there, but the better HDR I like on the 1 Mark 6 a lot better. This is why I give it here 4.4 points. I have to compare it with other phones as well. I might raise it here to 4.5 points at one point, yes. But for now it is conservatively just 4.4 points. Autofocus performance is the same, very, very good on the Sony Xperia device, especially the eye autofocus. No matter if you're using the main camera sensor, the ultra wide angle, or the telezoom lens, it's immediately finding the eye of a human or even an animal like a dog or a cat. Works quite fine here. Front camera is basically the same, nothing much has changed here. The camera UI has changed a lot actually, but the functionality is almost the same on the 1 Mark 6. There's just like the Video Pro mode and the Cinema Pro. These are the ones that are still missing on the 1 Mark 6. There's some functionality there still for video recording, like manual controls, but most of the manual Pro controls, and especially the Cinema Pro controls, and even the filters that we had there, are not there. Otherwise, when it comes to camera UI, one-handed usage, it is a bit different. Like we have a horizontal slider for the 1 Mark 5 to change exposure, and 1 Mark 6 is just like a vertical slider there. But almost everything can be used with one hand. Nice shutter button that we have, virtual or the real shutter button that we can use, and it is nicely integrated into the camera UI. So it is a slight downgrade there in camera UI right now, but if they upgrade and add the Video Pro features or even Cinema Pro features to the camera UI, it would even like surpass, I think, the Xperia 1 Mark 5, because it's more of a common one app that is more commonly using the same UI pattern as other smartphones, so everyone can agree that it's easy to use. And yeah, for now, the Xperia 1 Mark 5 with its 3 camera applications is winning this. Extra features is exactly the same. So we have the possibility to use an external microphone via 3.5mm headphone jack. We have the possibility to use an external vlog monitor with external microphone support if you want to, and you want to monitor audio via the headphone jack. And there's also the possibility to record on the micro SD card as well. So what does it leave us with? So let's take a look at the ranking list. Here you can see that the Xperia 1 Mark 6 takes the 6th place, and I did not plan it. No, it is really taking the 6th place over or surpassing the Xiaomi 14 here, which is 4.405 points. Why is it surpassing? It's not the main camera photo quality, because the Xiaomi 14 does a bit better job there. The ultra wide angle photo quality is not really this, because it's like basically on par. But zoom camera photo quality is slightly better on the Xperia 1 Mark 6 in comparison to the Xiaomi 14. But however, the Xiaomi 14, like I reported earlier, got a new update, especially for the longer zoom ranges, that uses AI to improve stuff here. So I will at one point test out the Xiaomi 14 against the 1 Mark 6 to see if we can reverse this or raise the point here for the Xiaomi 14 because of a better zoom. Video recording quality is something that I also have to check, but yes, so far it looks like they're being on par. Autofocus performance is a bit better on the 1 Mark 6, however, because we have this eye autofocus on all the lenses, where on the Xiaomi 14, yes, it has face detection and the main camera sensor is working fine, but when it comes to the tele sensor and the ultra wide sensor, we don't have this capabilities of focusing on the eye, just maybe on the face, that's all. Front camera performance is almost the same there. Then when it comes to camera UI, the Xperia 1 Mark 6 is slightly bit better because of the more one-handed usage options there, and especially the extra features. This is the one there where it's winning against the Xiaomi 14 with tons of extra features there on the Xperia 1 Mark 6. I'm just reminding you of the Xiaomi 14's problems with video recording quality with external microphones, for example. Such things that do exist. When it comes to the comparison between the Xperia 1 Mark 6 and the Huawei Mate 60 Pro, you can see the Mate 60 Pro has a slightly better main camera photo quality, slightly better ultra wide angle. It's a bit worse in terms of zoom camera photo quality. That's quite interesting. So I will maybe check them out as well. Video recording quality, for now, I would rate the Mate 60 Pro a bit higher there. Autofocus performance, of course, the Xperia is the best there. And front camera, the Mate 60 Pro is definitely better there than the Xperia. And when it comes to the camera UI, the Mate 60 Pro is losing against the Xperia. The same, losing against the Mate 60 Pro. The Mate 60 Pro is losing against the Xperia, and extra features it's also. So as you can see here, it's very, very close. And yeah, the 6th place, I'm quite surprised, because if you take a look at the Xperia 1 Mark 5, it's just 11th place. Where did it lose mostly? Yeah, it's the video recording quality for one hand. On the other hand, it's the zoom camera photo quality that improved a lot, also with the telemacro capabilities there. When it comes to portraits, however, I like the 1 Mark 5 a bit better than the 1 Mark 6, but this is mainly the colors. The sharpness and detail level is basically on par. Just the 1 Mark 6 wins with its 2x zoom that you can use for portraits or bokeh mode there as well. So that's it in terms of camera ranking here. What do you think? Write it down in the comment section. Until the next time, bye.